environment, you're talking about the biggest thing we can do as individuals is stop eating animals. That's a bigger impact for climate change than switching to an electric car.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Empower Global Women in Business podcast. And I have a guest with me today, Cheryl Leahy. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Good to have you. I'm excited for this conversation. Cheryl is an executive director with Animal Outlook program and a lawyer. Why you do what you do? Why did you choose this field?
Yeah, so Animal Outlook is an animal protection organization. I was always that kid who loved animals, and that's just, I think, something all of us have a piece of. Some kids are more like that than others. When I was in college, I did environmental studies as my undergrad major, and I learned a lot about the intersection between protecting animals from an animal cruelty or animal protection point of view and from an environmental protection point of view. So this issue of how we raise and kill animals in agriculture, it really opened my eyes to see that it touches on everything, right? So this idea of, if we want to help animals, where are the animals actually suffering? How many animals, are sort of trapped in these systems and in situations where they're being cruelly treated, being deprived, of kind of everything that they were ever evolved to do, right? I mean, it's really very bleak situation for them. At the end of the day, I mean, it's like there's just no hope. There's just nothing resembling a life that these, animals were kind of evolved to do. And at the same time, you have this incredible environmental destruction that's going on because of these systems that, really most people, I think, have a very outdated way of thinking about how animals are treated and raised in the meat, milk, and egg industries, or they don't think about it much at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really not old McDonald's farm. It's many, many billions of animals every year. So of course that touches on human health issues. It touches on human rights issues. So sometimes when I'm giving talks to, law students or other audiences, I'll say something just meant to be a little provocative. I'll say, I think the animal agriculture issue is the biggest social justice issue facing our time. Right. And I challenge them to come back and tell me, that I'm wrong or give me a counter argument. And no one ever has. And it's because really, at the end of the day, once you truly learn about it, once you see
Yeah.
the systemic harms, you
Mm.
could make an argument to come in and fight against the animal agriculture system. Some people say factory farming, but that's really the system from all sorts of different points of view, right? I came in it for the animals. Animal Outlook focuses on the animals. But then, like I said, environment, you're talking about the biggest thing we can do as individuals is stop eating animals. That's a bigger impact for climate change than switching to an electric car or doing other
Mhm.
lifestyle changes. So, water pollution, air pollution, right? Consumption of products. So you think as soon as you start scratching the surface, you realize just how big this issue is. And then with human rights, you have worker treatments, you have farmers in positions where they don't have the agency or the ability. They're just stuck in debt, and these big companies are, really exploiting them. You have environmental justice issues. You have the fights over fresh water, and who is that going to affect more globally as this continues to go on? And then, we have the irony in this country, especially of, these, what people call the diseases of affluence, right? We die in greater numbers, from heart disease and diabetes and cancers, and all those
Yeah.
things are clearly heavily connected to eating animal products. So,
Mm.
you could come at it from human health, you could come at it from human rights, you come at it from environment, you come at it from animals. But all together, I mean, that just makes such an incredibly, compelling case for needing really creative solutions, needing more attention, needing more resources to tackle this issue and reverse all the harms that we've been doing, over the last
Yeah.
several decades. We just cannot continue the way that we are with this system.
Amazing work, but this whole this two words, animal outlook, seem
Mhm.
to encompass so many issues inside of it, right?
Yeah.
All of them you mentioned, and actually just watched a documentary on the environmental things that happening globally and global warming and what's contributing to it. there are so many issues, right? For the workers, like you mentioned, for the people who are eating it, for the animals, for the environment, so many different sides of it. So can you talk to us what organization does? Like what is some of the
Yeah.
initiatives?
Yeah, and I mean, I think your point, the point of like, wow, this is a big issue, it is
Yeah,
really worth taking a moment to highlight here because it is a huge issue. And so I
yeah.
think we all in our lives try to figure out, well, what am I supposed to do? Right?
Right.
Whatever issue that we come upon,
Or, or how can we look, yeah, that would be we can talk about it in a little bit here. How can we contribute or what can we do to
right.
help, right? Hmm.
Right. And what happens is, I mean, we'll get into this later as well. I've got a lot on the science of change and behavior change and kind of self-improvement. But the first question we are all asking ourselves when we hear about a problem or something where like this is really overwhelming
Hmm.
is what is it that, will be more effective? What is it that I can do
Yeah.
with my interest, with my, bandwidth, with my skills, with my resources, right? Like, how do I create a solution that I will actually engage with and add value to? And I think the answer to that question for us at Animal Outlook is focusing on the animal issue,
Hmm.
specifically with farmed animals. And we're looking at 4 programs, all of which have an objective to move society forward, right? It's systemic change. Our job is not to sit in the shoes of what we think the government should be doing, right? We just don't have the resources for that. We are trying to find things that are going to be new, break new ground, and address the systemic issues. So, like I said, there's 4 programs. So the first program that we have is undercover investigations. So we
Hmm.
actually send people in to these animal ag facilities, slaughterhouses,
Yeah, yeah.
get
Those,
jobs in those places, and they bring in hidden cameras. So like we just released an investigation last week of Foster Farms in California, and that's a huge $3 billion chicken company in California. And I mean, it was just unremitting violent cruelty the entire time. I mean, animals rolled over with forklifts and still alive and then reversed back over, throwing, kicking, right? I mean, I don't have to go into the gory details, but I
I see.
just want you to understand like the
Yeah.
kernel of this, right? The value of this is that the system that we have is so hidden from us, and the
Yeah.
level of cruelty that's happening is so hidden from us that the act of going in and exposing it and then going on, major media outlets, we can get many hundreds of millions of people reach through media outlets, actually changes people's perspective, educates people, moves them forward, changes their behavior, sort of advances the system forward. Just the act of exposure. Think about all of the kind of big exploitative systems that we have in the world. And this one really seems to rise to the top because it's like they're telling us one thing. We all hear thousands of messages, right, about, why we should buy these animal products and, whatever
Hmm.
reasons. So we see cute little pictures of animals on them and stuff. It's all the people who's giving us those messages are people whose job it is to sell us more animal products. So these investigations can break that open and be that
Hmm.
counterpoint, showing the truth alone can be hugely impactful. And then our second program is legal advocacy. So sometimes our law campaigns, so that could be lawsuits, that could be enforcement of existing law, that could be some policy work. Sometimes that's leveraging what we found in the investigations as evidence to drive the case
Hmm.
forward. So sometimes that's getting animal cruelty law enforcement, which is very difficult to get ironically, where the cruelty is taking place, which is in these companies in
Wow.
the business sense, right? So I think
Hmm.
the average person would see this kind of footage and be horrified and say, well, this is cruel. Isn't there someone doing something about this? Right. And the ironic and sad reality is the animal cruelty laws are often enforced for, somebody who is neglecting a dog, right? And oftentimes, that's not part of a systemic issue. I mean, except for, poverty and kind of maybe they need more resources to deal with that. Some people are, just sort of the aberrant, sadistic human being and they're violent to an animal. But if you're talking
Yeah.
about it from the point of view of where is the suffering, where is the cruelty, it's happening in these businesses for business reasons or very, closely related reasons, right?
Hmm.
18-hour days in this last investigation, 100-degree weather, you know. So our job is try to make the law that exists work
Hmm.
for the animals. And then we're also doing cases where the laws that we're using were never intended to protect animals in the first place. So that might be false advertising laws, that might be antitrust, but all of these kind of like unfair business practices things that are going on that at their core, are about basically systematic exploitation of animals, can be the basis for some of these really creative and interesting cases, both with Animal Outlook and other organizations. But I think that is something that can be a real targeted and real high impact thing. And we can see other lawyers then seeing the success of those cases and picking up those cases and doing that. So that's legal advocacy. And then their third program is farm transitions. So many people don't know a lot of the farmers who actually are on the grounds with these animals and have control, like let's say a poultry farmer might have control over millions of birds. They are in situations where they themselves are, kind of powerless, like I mentioned earlier, in the face of these large companies. Like, some of these are household names, like Tyson or Purdue or Sanderson, like these big poultry companies. And so our job is to give them a solution, a way out, because it's very hard for them to get out, and basically get them out of farming animals and into farming plants, so they can be kind of, part of that alliance and that solution. And then finally, we have our vegan outreach and education program. So that is meant to empower people and kind of make vegan eating more mainstream, make it more of a social norm, because most people care about animals. That's actually what those statistics say. 97% of people oppose animal cruelty. It doesn't matter how you do that kind of research, where in the world do you do it, what political affiliation, what gender, what race, what age, right? Everybody pretty much comes down to that. And then ironically, we have systematic exploitation of animals. So our job is to help people connect their behavior through kind of, boycotting the system and being part of a movement. Because I think, vegan eating culturally, its time is here, so that's the fourth program. And they all work together, all the programs work together to leverage it. So that's our answer to your question of, well, what do we do about this, right? How do we take this difficult, kind of issue? But there's a lot of other legitimate ways you could do it.
Yeah, the education about this, and it sounds like this is it's wonderful what this organization is doing. That's the future that we want for us and for our future generation, for our kids and grandkids, right? And I think education that's it. That's a big part of it. So I love those 4 programs that the organization covers, because people don't know, right? Like, how do you know, like what you were from what you were sharing, even from what's happening, we can pass it on the way driving, because that's just image that came up to me, where we drive by car, we can see it from afar, but we don't know, or we can even smell it from afar in some cases, which talks about huge environmental, and I cannot even imagine what it's doing for the animals or for the workers that work in that place. Where if I'm only driving through, I can feel the smell, right? So I think it's so important that the organization, this non-profit organization, is doing the education, and is huge.
You live in Northern California. You live in a place that has tons and tons of these huge facilities. It's also a place, Central Valley of California, it's also a place where most of the country is getting its fruits and vegetables. But, it's such an interesting contrast. I remember my kids being all excited to see all the tomato trucks going down the 5 when we were driving on our, on our road trip back down from Northern California. And then meanwhile, we're passing a feedlot and it smells horrible and it's huge, right? Or these giant dairies. It's such a juxtaposition, between what I think people think of farming as and what the reality is, which is just misery.
So what can the person, like, what is the first step the person can take? Just to first simple, like, for those listeners who listen to us, and then they want to learn more, they want to educate themselves, right? Where can they go to learn about this?
Well, we have a lot of resources on our website. We think of ourselves as sort of giving people the hows and whys. Like, we're very kind of inviting and encouraging. We want people to really jump into this stuff. So the whys are often, the educational resources, right? So what is happening? We have been doing undercover investigations for a couple of decades now. animaloutlook.org/investigations will get you all of those videos, and some of them, Tom Summits will compile them into, like, here's what's going on in the dairy industry, here's what's going on in the chicken industry, whatever. So you can do one of those, kind of YouTube deep dives on these issues. What we have found though, from our experience, and then in the last couple of years, we've done a lot of research in partnership with great, educational institutions and experts on what does it really take to go from being concerned about an issue or just newly learning about it to actually incorporating some kind of change in your life.
Right.
And so what we've found, one of the big takeaways is if people don't feel like they can do it, they're not going to want the information. So, I mean, it's hard, for somebody like me who's been just immersed in this for years, it's hard for me to hear, don't show me that because it's going to make me want to stop eating animals. And it's like, well, don't you want to know? Right. But that is a real, real important issue. And the reason is what the researchers and the theorists call self-efficacy. So what self-efficacy is I need to believe that I can make this change personally, that I have the strength, I
Yes.
have the ability to do
Right.
it. And I need to believe that if I make the change, it's going to make a difference. So your initial reaction was, this problem is huge. Right?
Yeah.
And this problem is huge. But one thing that's great is to start with an understanding that we're actually pretty much on the same page when it comes to our values. Most people that I meet, don't worry about that other 3%, the 97% that oppose animal cruelty, we agree that we want a better world, right? That the system that we have is broken.
Yeah.
So our job is not this daunting task of changing people's values, right? We don't have to convince people that animal cruelty is bad or that what we're seeing is a problem or that it's okay that we feel an emotional reaction to watching something like that, right?
Yeah.
What we have to do is basically say, okay, well, what role can I play? And I think changing your diet can be a great step with that. And, most people, it takes some time to start, like people do meatless Mondays, or we have a campaign called Veg Week, where we really encourage people to take at least a week to go vegan and then hope that they continue and they can, win prizes and encourage their city to do proclamations and stuff. But a lot of this starts with self-efficacy. So it's not just what is the problem, it's how do I address the problem?
Yeah.
And that means I have to believe that I can make those changes.
That I can actually,
Yeah. So
That's
I
good.
know
Yeah.
a lot of people were saying when I was younger, when I first went vegetarian, actually, before I went vegan, a lot of people were like, well, what are you going to eat? Like, well, how is it going to, you're going to miss all this different food. That was never the problem. The problem was other people's questions, right? When I was that young. And I wasn't equipped for that. I was a little kid.
Interesting.
And I remember going to like family parties and my uncle making silly meat pun jokes like, oh, when you grow up and you have a meeting, like you're going to be like, sorry, I can't go to the meeting because I'm vegetarian. Like, what was I going to say to that? I was, whatever, 12-year-old kid. So there are things that from the point of view of looking at the mountain, right? How do I climb this mountain? You're going to expect, but once you start doing it, all you have to believe is you keep going. So a lot of what we do is give people that understanding. You're not going to be hungry. You're not going to miss that food, right? Our bodies are very good at adapting our taste. And most people don't realize that. And there's so much amazing vegan food. So we do that kind of thing. Okay, so that's one of the big takeaways from all the science is self-efficacy. Another huge takeaway from the science is community. So think about it this way. I may have, and this is when community comes into play. I may have a positive interest. Like I may be like, oh, that sounds really cool. Like let's say I meet you at a party and you're like, you know what? I have an amazing interior designer. I love how my living room looks. And I'm like, that sounds awesome. I would love to have a great living room too. But I don't have the tools or the confidence or the experience to go home and be like, I'm going to sit down with a book about interior design, or I'm going to go do my own research, right?
Yeah.
What would help me is if then you said to me, I'm going to come over and we're going to look at your living room together, right? Or we're going to talk about this next week. Let's go have coffee and, we're going to make a plan together. So what that sounds like in scientific terms is when you're extrinsically motivated, meaning you haven't internalized that yet. I'm not ready to take on those changes myself, but I kind of want
But I want to explore. I want to look at it.
And what I need in that moment is other people around me who are going to help
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to something like changing your diet, I mean, you could think about all different changes in your life this way. But when it
Yeah.
comes to something like
Mm-hmm.
changing your diet or getting active for animals, becoming an activist, right? Going out and, maybe asking a company to change its policies or whatever. You need more in that moment where you're going from, I kind of like this, but I'm not ready to do it myself. You need community around you more. So that could be
Yeah.
online community, that could be meeting people at organizations like ours, right? But you need to rely on people. And what so often happens is when people are making a change, they're getting the opposite reaction. Their friends and family are being like, well, this is weird. What about Thanksgiving? Right. And that's not what they need at that time.
Right.
They need the opposite of that. Somebody to come in,
Yeah.
or even sometimes vegans make
New
this.
encouragement. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes vegans make this mistake where they'll hear what sounds like an excuse, where they're like, well, I don't know what to do about Thanksgiving, right? And they're like, come on, the animals are suffering. That's the exact wrong answer, right? The answer should be, I'm going to help you, right? Rely on me. I'm going to, hey, here's my favorite thing I've been doing, right?
Yeah.
So I think people hear community and it can get very kind of like abstract. What does that mean? It's really important when you are taking the first steps and you haven't yet internalized it. So
Mm-hmm.
even if I might believe I could do it, I could probably design my living room. You know what I mean? But I don't know anything about interior design, right?
Yeah.
So if you haven't not yet done those first steps, that's when your community needs to come in and encourage you forward. And then the third big thing that comes out of this is identity. So we all have identities of all different things, like, where we're from, what our traditions are, what our values are, right? Like, but what is really important is to think, again, most of us oppose animal cruelty. So that's already in our values. How does that match with who we consider ourselves to be? The unique individual that comes, is sort of, we're all a puzzle of different pieces, right? So how do we create an understanding that's thorough enough of what these values would drive our behavior to be? And what it needs to be is not just, well, being vegan or being an animal activist or, whatever your cause is compatible with my values. It has to be, I am a better this or that because of it. I am a better mom because I have a
Yeah.
more compassionate worldview, right? I am better at teaching my kids ethical reasoning and critical thinking because
Mm-hmm.
I can see it through this lens,
Yeah.
right? It's not just it's okay. It's this enhances me. If I don't do it, I'm going to lose something, right? It's part of
Mm-hmm.
my growth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last thing is storytelling. So that comes up in the science all over the place. So storytelling basically says we all have a story. The way we understand morality and moral progress and moral challenges is through story. So understanding our own stories, understanding other stories, and being able to communicate in that way is huge. So that's what I
Mm-hmm.
mean. It breaks down to, it's not just the information, it's all
Yeah.
those other things too.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is great, and it can be applied to anything. It's so
Yeah,
important, right? To have the community of support, to have the community for education, for accountability, with anything and everything. And we don't know what we don't know. And I love that, let me help you with this interior design. Let me help you explore what
right,
this means, and then we are more confident to take the steps. And then with the community, there is a whole, like, I'm not alone. We can do
right,
it together. I love that. I love the once a week challenges. I think that starting that, and then because I know how I feel myself, like when I switch my diet, when I change
right,
my own diet, and it's, I think, again, when we try, unless we try, we don't know how the skin feels, how just
right.
overall, yeah, all of those things. Yes, I love those. So thank you so much, Cheryl, for sharing and really educating today on our podcast. What is the link for the website that our listeners
It's
can go to?
animaloutlook.org. ANIMALOUTLOOK.org. And
Awesome.
we have all the socials too. You can follow us and,
Uh-huh.
join some of our campaigns and, you could win prizes if you pledge to go vegan. There's also some great educational resources that are free and you can jump in and be a volunteer, whatever you're ready to jump into doing. We have options on there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. I'm going to move us to the final kind
All
of
right.
section of our conversation, rapid fire questions. And let me know when you're ready.
Ready.
Okay, awesome. Your favorite book name is?
I like Crime and Punishment. It's a classic, but when I was a kid, that was the thing that really got me into reading those old classics.
Beach or mountains?
Oh, beach for sure.
Yeah, you're in LA. Makes sense. Favorite international destination to visit?
Oh, I did a study abroad in Ireland for a year when I was in college, and I just loved to be there, and I want to go back there. It's been a while.
That's on my list. I've never been. Yeah, but it's beautiful.
Yeah,
Summer or winter?
summer. I am a weather wimp. I cannot be cold.
Me too. Yeah, I was just in New York for today, so it was enough for me.
Yeah,
It
yeah. I
wasn't
grew up
that
in
cold yet.
Chicago, and then I just had to get out of that cold weather.
Yeah. And then the final question is thing that you have discovered about yourself recently.
I think I should spend more time listening to my kid, how my kids see their own experiences. I think I've spent a
Hmm.
lot of time, my kids are 9 and almost 11. I think I've spent a lot of time in their younger years kind of reading them and going from there. And now they have so much more insight into themselves that I'm learning just from being a lot more inquisitive, you know.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that. I haven't heard that on our podcast yet, but it's so profound for mothers. I was actually just speaking with my daughter, and yeah, I was sharing with her all this passion project that they can do, right? Just to really
Yeah.
tap into their inner selves versus the outside world telling them. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, yeah, and they can do it. Like, don't
Yeah.
don't kind of think you need to do it for them. Like you just have to pull it out of them so you can understand it, right? It's already happening.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for taking the time to share, this important issue, to just educate us and sharing all the resources and yeah, taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful talking with you.
Bye, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.